Now your machine, once it goes to www.technosurge.com, will probably access a lot of different resources on it. It's probably going to establish a few connections and download a lot of different resources from www.technosurge.com. Now, if every time it accessed this server, if it would have to go and redo this process of asking the root server and then the top level domain servers and then the technosurge.com servers just to get this, it wouldn't be an efficient way of being able to communicate. And so what it does is when it gets the answer back from the last domain server, the authoritative answer, then it will cache the answer. And so that answer will be logged and it will say, okay, www.technosurge.com has this IP address. And now instead of going and asking all the other servers every time, it just looks in its local cache, its local DNS cache, looks for that information, and then uses that information to reach out to www.technosurge.com. Now, obviously, things change often out there. So there are times when I'm going to switch servers, and instead of being on one server, I'm going to move that to another server, or perhaps that server has gone offline and it needs to be moved to another server, or perhaps I've changed services. So there are going to be times when I want to expire that cache in there. So there is this time to live. When this machine gets the authoritative answer back and it puts it into the cache, it also puts in a time to live in that cache as well. And that's going to be a countdown for when that record is going to expire. Now, it used to be that we'd set really long time to lives on our records because we wanted it to, we didn't want it to keep coming back to our servers and constantly ask for that information. But information wasn't as dynamic either. In today's age, we have some pretty dynamic content that's out there and pretty dynamic changes that happened within our networks. And if we say that our time to live is going to be 10 days, then we have to, if every time we make a change, we're going to have to live with that straddling those two environments for 10 days before it actually switch over. So now what I mean by that is, let's say have two servers and the domain or the DNS record that we got back says, this is the IP address that you're looking for www.technosurge.com. I'm hosting it off of this server right here. I decide to change, and now I'm going to move it to a different service provider. So my IP address is changed. If I have a 10-day expiration on that, that means that I am not going to get an update for all of my clients until 10 days later. And so in that scenario, I may want to change the time to live down to, maybe it's 15 minutes. And then I can make the change, and 15 minutes later, it makes the change. Or what I've also done in the past is I put a long time to live on my records, like let's say 10 days. And then if I know that I'm going to make a change in maybe a couple weeks from now, I'll switch it from 10 days down to just a few minutes. And then leading up to that, then everybody will be getting this update and we'll be constantly checking in. I can make my change, and then after my change is made, then I'm going to make it go back to the 10-day time to live, and so then I'm back to where it was before. Now in today's age, DNS, doing all this DNS work and doing these lookups every 15 minutes isn't as big of a deal as it was 20 years ago. When it was 20 years ago, bandwidth was at a premium, and you did whatever you could to save that bandwidth. So lower time to lives are not that big of a deal nowadays, but it used to be much more bigger deal, especially when you get into more remote areas like Alaska and some of the remote areas of Alaska and some other countries that don't have as good internet connection and bandwidth still is at a premium. Then you do have to start thinking a little bit about what your time to live is and how often you want machines to check in with that time to live. Now, typically, we all visit a lot of the same resources. There's some pretty popular sites out there. So now, if your internet service provider is allowing all this communication to go out to the root server and top-level domain server and domain server, if it's doing all of that, then all of the machines that an internet service provider has, that generates a lot of traffic for that internet service provider. So what often an internet service provider do is they'll set up a caching server. And so most of the time, your machine is actually going out to maybe a caching server or some other server that's out there that is going to do the resolution for you and go and contact these servers. And so this caching server right here will then cache that onto the cache, so that any other clients that are connecting out and asking for the same resources that you're asking for, it already has an answer for that. So ISPs will cache that information for all their customers to use. And that's pretty common for us to use caching servers, both from the ISP's perspective, and if your ISP is, sometimes you'll bypass the ISP and you'll go to like another caching server that Google offers or some other open DNS, or there's a lot of other options out there that you can send your traffic to rather than trying to go out directly to the root server. Because obviously, if there's too much traffic going to this root server, that can be, there's got to be a massive amount of traffic going to this root server already. And if every single client were to do that, then it would really bog down whatever our root servers are. And then we also have a company DNS server. And so this could be your machine is contacting this company DNS server. So when you're on the network, it's using that DNS server. Then it's going out to the ISP, or maybe something like an open DNS or some other caching server. And then that is going out and doing the resolution for you. It's caching it for you and for every other customer. When it gets the response back, then this machine caches it right here. And the reason why you would set this up is, once again, so your company doesn't have a lot of, as much DNS traffic going to the outside world that is unnecessary. So as companies grow, it becomes more and more likely that they're going to have a DNS caching server inside the LAN, so that way your machine can access things directly rather than all that DNS traffic taking up the lines, the internet connections to the outside world at your company level. This also would look like maybe if you look on your home network, it's probably your router or your ISP that's providing those DNS, is the DNS server for your home network. Hope this video is helping you out. Can you help me out by hitting that like button?